Greetings, sisters and brothers, comrades, the global community. Welcome to your favorite show, Kumbukeni. I'm your host, Milton Alimadi, joined by my co-host, Sister Nduku. I think she needs to drink some water. Brother Adesoji. Sister Nduku, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself before we turn it to Brother Adesoji?
Yes, my name is Nduku, and yes, I did need to drink water. Thank you for that, Brother Alimadi. I'm an activist and an advocate for the Black community and for Africa, and a co-host on Kumbukeni doing exactly that. We are here to correct the false narrative that has been perpetrated against Africa for centuries, to finally tell our story as Africans ourselves. And yes, correct the narrative. It's good to be here today and looking forward to the conversation, Brother Adisoji.
Yes, the name is Soji Ginla, and again, I'm one of the co-hosts on Kumbukeni. As usual, we're here to take a deep dive on another topic and help decolonize our minds. So back to you, Brother Milton.
Yeah, but you left out the other part. Where do you broadcast from? It's
Oh.
okay. Don't be ashamed.
Oh well. I'm coming from the center of imperialism itself, the heart of the former empire.
The United Kingdom.
Brother Alimadi, you always
find
have
this so
to
hard to
expose
say
our
it.
brother and his affiliation.
All right, so viewers, today we are looking at something called HR 7311. And this is a U.S. law, congressional bill introduced by a Democrat, a brother, right?
Yes,
Congressman
Black man.
Gregory Meeks, who's actually the chair of the House Foreign Relations Committee. So he has some clout. He has some
former chair now.
Is this the same committee that Ilhan Omar was just voted out of?
Yes.
No. Ilhan was trying to get into the Senate committee, and it's a shame, really.
Different, okay.
So it's a big shame, you know. But anyway, we can discuss that also in the show. So we're looking at this bill, and it's called, I laughed at you. Guess what?
You need water.
That's what the ancestors do. They say, brother.
Sister, I'm afraid of you now.
You've been jinxed.
Don't mess with this. Yeah? Some powerful Kenyan gods. All right, so it's called Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa. But, comrades, I think before we go into the elements of this bill, let's go into the background a little bit of this conflict, because I think it will help viewers put this whole thing in perspective.
Yes.
So the Russian Federation invaded in March 2022, correct?
Yes.
And then there was
prior to that, they've already annexed Crimea. So
Right. So then they had at the UN, they voted to condemn this invasion, right?
Correct.
And 17 African countries abstained. 8 countries were absent.
Yeah.
The US definitely was not happy with that. So why don't we weigh in a little bit about that, the outcome of that vote, where African countries essentially, many of them stood out, because if you add the 17 with the 8 who simply didn't even show up, we're talking 25.
Yeah.
Right? That's a lot of countries. Sister Nduku, you want to weigh in on that aspect first?
I'm very happy to hear that happened. I was happy when it happened, to hear of it when it happened, and I'm happy to this day that to hear that it happened. It's about time African countries stood by their autonomy. It's about time African countries say, no, we're not going to get in this business, US. We decide for ourselves. And I'm looking forward to more actions by African countries that stand by their independence and their autonomy, because if we're going to be independent, if Africa is going to be independent, then it needs to be able to independently decide who it's going to partner with. So I was very happy to hear about it. And to this day, I'm still happy to hear about it.
Okay, so Brother Adesoji, before I turn to you, I also want to add another aspect to the same question. I don't think, I think listeners may misunderstand Sister Nduku and think that she's saying, okay, it's good that these countries did not condemn the invasion of Ukraine, but that's not what she's saying.
No.
Because there are elements at play. So, Brother Desoye, embrace that part and make it clear to this is not a straightforward
Thank
bill,
you.
good and bad invasion. There are many things that play in the background.
Yes.
So you could discuss that a little bit of that as well.
Okay, so to understand that mindset, one has to go back to the Bandung Conference, the non-aligned movement, of which all of the African countries are signatories to. So which is, we hold no grudges against anyone, we'll deal with anyone based on the merits of every particular issue. Now, with regards to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, as per signatory to the UN Declaration of the Non-Interference Clause, by that very nature, it's condemnation enough. But when you make it specific and the language used and couched in those clauses, then it proves problematic for African countries, because if you look a little bit deeper, you will see some Cold War language. And when I mean Cold War language, it is almost like going back to pre-19 Berlin, the fall of Berlin Wall, 1989, where you had the NATO countries on one side, you had the Warsaw countries on one side.
Right.
And the Warsaw countries being all the countries east of the Rhine River, you're talking East Germany, all the way up to Russia. And every other country on that side on the west side of the river, West Germany to the other side, was considered to be Western and NATO allied. So when Sister was saying she's happy, what she's saying is Africa is remembering its agency, and as such is going back to the idea that we're going to be non-aligned, non-interested in aggression of any kind. So we're going to stand where we want and look, and hopefully nothing goes awry in the international scene.
Yeah. And then, of course, what you're saying in plain language is that the Africans were saying, we don't want this business that you're either with us or against us attitude.
Oh, sorry, I forgot the George Bush language. That element of it. Yes.
Precisely.
Yeah. So
okay, very good. So 17 abstained, 8 were absent, and then United States started sending diplomats to African countries, asked them, what happened, what do you need from us,
they could have missed their flights.
But go ahead. You want to add something?
No, I'm saying they could. I mean, you said 8 were absent.
No, I got it.
So you can't fly directly to the United States. All the connecting flights, logistics will have happened. The guys who, we all know how New York operates. They might flag down a taxi cab, and the taxi man just drove past them.
Why are you even taking that when there's a specific example, which was tragic at the end, actually? The vote to authorize the invasion of Libya. Remember that?
Yes.
South Africa cast a very decisive vote in favor.
Yep.
But the South African representative did not want to do so. So he went and he hid in the bathroom. Guess what Susan Rice did?
Followed him to the bathroom?
Outside the door until he came out and said, come, we are going to go and vote. And South Africa went and voted.
So it doesn't sound...
The rest is history.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like they're asking them. It doesn't sound like they're asking them.
No. And that's why what you said is very important, that they actually stood up.
Yeah.
They stood up. But then, and we are going into this background because that influenced subsequently what the U.S. started working on, realizing that not everybody is an enemy of Russia. and this could escalate because there are definitely going to be more things that we vote on with respect to this conflict. So that was the genesis. Greg Meeks was not just sitting in his congressional office one day and say, you know what, let me come up with this bill, how to counter Russia maligning Africa, blah, 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 blah. A lot of conversations went into it, and the reference point was that vote. This could get out of hand. So we need something to bring this under control. And that is how they started discussing and ended up with this bill.
I have a question, Brother Alimadi.
Yes, sister.
So Gregory Meeks is an African in America, a descendant of Africans enslaved in America.
Yes.
And he understands what sanctions do to a nation. Why would an African want to do that to fellow Africans?
Okay, so I want to put it not in academic terms, because sometimes we just need to go
plain language.
The plain language that Malcolm was famous for. So listeners, if you go to YouTube and you put Malcolm X House Negro versus Field Negro, and Malcolm lays it out clearly and plainly that just because all of us are Africans or African descendants, we are not on the same page sometimes when it comes to what is up here.
And the House Negroes don't like to hear that term, right? It rubs them off the wrong way. So my recent term, it's not mine, I didn't coin it, but the one that I find more palatable to them when I talk to them is, they still don't like it, but it lands better than the House Negro, is gatekeepers. They're
right.
keeping the gate to the system and maintaining the system.
Yeah, I like that, gatekeeper, because gatekeepers then applies to all gatekeepers. You see? I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yes, I was actually going to add on the premise that when Greg Meeks, like you said, probably didn't come up with the bill, but was, asked to put it up, it would be interesting to look at the names of those who are co-sponsors on the bill. In researching for this program, I actually went in and I checked. There is Karen Bass.
Yeah.
She is district.
She's mayor now.
Thank you for naming them. Thank you.
Mayor of Los Angeles now. But go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So at the time she was a Democrat representative for District 37,
and was chair of the House Subcommittee on Africa. Not the entire foreign relations, but the subcommittee on Africa. But go ahead.
There is Troy Carter. Troy Carter is Democrat, Louisiana, 2nd District. There is Colin Allred. He is Democrat, Texas.
Yeah.
There is Al Green, Democrat, Texas, District 9. There is Donald Payne, District
New Jersey,
District 10.
Yes.
Right. And the father was
my congressman.
Very famous congressman, actually.
Now, the irony is, of all the aforementioned, they were all born before 1970. So they lived through the Cold War era. But one person was born just outside of the 70s, and that was Colin Allred, Democrat, Texas, 1983. You would think history books, he's from Texas, so there are no history books in Texas.
But even that, I don't think much has changed in terms of Russian relation. U.S.-Russian relation is still very similar to U.S.-Soviet, so we can't give him a pass just because he was born after. But finish your
So in looking at all those names, I then so what ties all these people together? Texas, California, New Jersey, New York, money.
Big states.
Big stakes, big money. Okay, whose money? What sort of money are we talking about?
Oh, okay.
Then you go deeper. You look at their sponsors, who contributes to their campaigns. And interesting, you will see. I don't want to rub you off, your thunder.
Come
So
on.
carry on.
The
Carry on,
suspense
brother
is
Milton.
killing us.
He's saving it for the latter
Expose
part
them.
for
Please
the latter
expose
part of the
them.
show. All right. So, do you want us to discuss some of the elements of this bill now?
Yes,
And
please.
Yes.
Let's break it down.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
see.
Yes.
I have to break down somewhere.
And the goal, Brother Alimadi, as you get
Okay,
ready
yeah,
to break it down, the goal, just to explain to our audience, the goal is, because a lot of times when you hear about a bill and you're busy thinking about your bills, your regular bills that you pay, your children, you're making dinner, you're going to visit family, you have all these chores and all this running around to do. The last thing you want to do as an individual is sit down and read a bill. Right? Every time you think of a bill, yes, you want to be involved in the issues that are being represented, but you're like, I don't have the time to sit and think about it. So what we are doing on Kumbukeni is breaking it down for you so that if you're in the car, if you're in the train, if you're walking, you can just listen and understand what this is doing.
Right.
So that's the importance
And also,
of doing this.
you can't really blame people because their language is normally very dry, academic.
Which is where you need to get
intentionally so.
And very dangerous.
I had to have it.
It is a legal. You need a legal dictionary, but again, we understand not everyone wants to bother with it, and it's not even bother. It's tedious to look at a legal dictionary.
But sister, this is where you need to remind them about the value of.
Yes. So this is again Kumbukeni and many other podcasts, but Kumbukeni, in order for us, myself, Brother Adesoji, Brother Milton, to dedicate and commit more time to doing that research that is tedious to do, for Adesoji to go to that legal dictionary and look up the words so that he can find language that is more palatable and digestible for you all. You can please join us on our Patreon community at patreon.com/Kumbukeni, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Kumbukeni1. To subscribe, you just go to the YouTube channel Kumbukeni, click subscribe. You don't even have to watch any show. It would be nice if you watch the shows because you will learn something. But
for sure,
you're not obligated to do anything once you subscribe. You're not going to get annoying alerts unless you choose to do so. So all you need to do is go and click subscribe on the channel, and it helps us get more viewership and be able to generate an income from this, which is going to allow us more time to do the research.
Here. Thank you,
correct,
sister.
Correct.
All right, so let's go into it. I've split it up into 3 parts. So I'm going to read for a minute or so. And if you want, I know you're the notes maniac, so you can make notes if you want, or just memorize. And then I'll pause after reading for a little so we can break it down. All right. This act may be cited as the, quote, Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act. All right. Actually, I was going to read a little more, but let's pause.
Yes.
Because the title alone is so, I don't know. I'll leave the words for you. Let's go to you first.
I had to, Adesoji, go ahead.
Okay. So, again, I had to have my trusted ready when I was doing that.
Did you need to look up malign?
So it's countering malign. Okay. Well, malign, when I checked the dictionary, said harmful, adverse, and shameful. Like, okay, shameful Russian activities. Okay. So I then said, okay, I wonder what those activities are. But, continue with the reading.
Okay, thank you. Your sister, did you want to add?
Yes. When I saw that, I asked myself, because for me, I go through the process. Why is this happening? I said to myself, what are the malign Russian activities, like Brother Adesoji said? And does the US have malign activities in Africa?
Thank you. Or you could say, which US activities in Africa are not malign?
Which US activities in Africa are not malign?
Okay.
Do not bring harm, like Adesoji described malign, right? Do not bring harm to Africa. Do not bring shame to Africa. We're talking about Western media. Western media is all about bringing shame to Africa.
Right. And this is coming, by the way, from the country that led the destruction of an African country.
Multiple African
Libya.
countries. Yes.
Libya led to the
Good example.
destruction, led to the execution of a president, sodomized with a bayonet,
Yes. Yep.
and they're talking about malign. Okay, so let's go into this. Let's see what this whole malign business is. It is the sense of Congress that the United States, one, should regularly assess the scale and scope of the Russian Federation's influence and activities in Africa that undermine United States objectives and interest. I hope we're making notes.
Yes.
And
yep.
two, determine how, A, to address and counter such influence and activities effectively. This is dangerous stuff. Including through appropriate United States foreign assistance programs. Wow. So we're talking taking food off the table, huh?
Yeah.
And B, to hold accountable the Russian Federation and African governments and their officials who are complicit in aiding such malign influence and activities. So are they going to give a list to every African official so that before they engage in Russia, they say, wait, this is on the malign list. This is not on the malign list.
Check.
Check. But I'll come back to you guys. This is just my interruption. Let me continue for a little bit. 3, strategy and implementation plan report. A, strategy and implementation plan. No later than 90 days after the date of this enactment of this act, the Secretary of State shall develop and submit to the appropriate congressional committees a strategy and implementation plan. We need to get a copy of that.
Yes.
Outlining United States efforts to counter the malign influence and activities of the Russian Federation and its proxies.
Yeah.
Guys, make sure you're not proxies.
Yeah.
In Africa, including programs and other initiatives designed to, one, strengthen democratic institutions, improve government transparency and accountability, improve standards related to human rights, labor, anti-corruption initiatives, fiscal transparency, monitor natural resources.
Imagine that.
And extractive industries and other tenets of good governance. Just a little bit, and then let's break what we've had so far. Let me just finish this section. 2, monitor and report on Russian political influence and disinformation operations and the activities of Russia-connected or Russian-funded private military contractors in Africa. Oh, this is where I know the brother is like boiling together.
There's a lot to chew. Yes, Adesoji, you go ahead. There's a lot to break down.
Let's break down what we've heard so far to this point.
Okay. So for me, I will start with that section 1, strengthen democratic institutions. Okay. There's a Yoruba saying which goes like this. It says, which is, if you're going to give me clothes, I first of all have to look at your apparel to see whether it is you can actually provide what it is you say you can provide. So in this space, you're talking about the hypocrisy of the entire question. To strengthen democratic institutions. In the United States, there is a Mr. Lewis bill waiting to be signed to guarantee voters' rights for everyone in the United States.
So you're saying charity begins at home.
There you go.
Representative Lewis is long left.
So what has become of that bill? That is one aspect.
I like that. Practice what you preach.
Yes.
There you go. So improve government transparency and accountability. In the last, in 2022, recorded police deaths was about 1,933. Of that, only 5% came with indictments, and only 3% ended up in conviction. Talk about transparency and accountability. Improving standards related to human rights.
Listen.
The last couple of years, we had kids being put in cages.
I think we need some African drums right here, just to take a pause.
We had
sister. You say it like a joke, but I'm saying
take a pause.
Going forward,
we
next week, if I can have a drum somewhere,
we'll get a drum. We will get a drum. We will get a drum.
Yeah.
So we had,
but that's how shows, keep adapting. I like that idea a lot. You're gonna bring the drum, but go ahead.
So we had kids being put in cages, kids lost in the system,
wrested away from their
parents. Exactly.
Human rights violations. Keep talking, brother.
For the mere idea that it's part of the notion of the United States that, give us your ill, your sick, and we shall embrace them.
Don't forget our Haitian brothers and sisters at the border.
There you go.
I mean, and horses.
There's so many to go.
Brother is killing it, but let's go to sister.
So
brother, we're gonna have to go to sister. You know why? Because there's a lot more in this bill. We've only dealt with 10% so far, and I want us to cover the entire bill. But make a note, if anything,
since he's mid-sentence and I did interrupt him, I'm okay with him finishing and then I'll come in.
Oh, we won't finish the thing though.
All right.
No. I just want to finish that.
Okay.
So he says, with regards to anti-corruption initiatives.
See, I told you.
There was a sitting president who was earning money from the same state and he governs. While he was in power, whatever came of those anti-corruption initiatives?
Nothing. He is still capable of running.
I can still go on, but I will.
He will yield the ground. But as I'm thinking, this is the other demand that we need to make, although they won't follow because somebody else pays their bill. This is the moment where African countries or African Union would come up with a similar bill, right?
Right.
To monitor malign activities in the United States as well
against the African
community.
You know. But go ahead, sister.
No, I like that. African Union, we are charging you with that. What do
Get serious. Wake up.
Mandate.
Yep.
Get together. Put together a bill that is going to say to the US, knock, knock. You took our children from our land. What is going on? We see that you're mistreating them. You're violating their rights.
Yep.
We are going to sanction you. You can no longer get resources from Africa until you sort this out.
Yep.
You can no longer have your private companies in Africa until you sort this out. And by the way, get your military out of Africa in the next 24 hours until you sort this out.
Right.
Our brothers and sisters, our children are asking for reparations. You have not listened to them. You have not done anything about it. You cannot do business in Africa until you do something about it.
Think about that. They've not even issued a statement. The United Nations issued a statement.
You cannot do business in
Africa.
Africa.
A just call. And the African Union, nothing.
Yes.
Did you see a statement from the African Union after Ty Nichols was killed by those five?
And anyone
thugs pretending to be police officers,
And any country that supports you will be in violation of these sanctions.
Very good. All right. Are you going to add, or should I continue?
Listen, I have so much. So for me, the thing I was looking at is the US has no moral ground to do this.
Absolutely.
They have no moral ground, which is what Brother Adesoji broke down. Yeah. We went through 4 years of Lord. I have no respectful word to describe this man. A clown, basically, leading the nation, and nothing. They want to stand by their laws. Apparently, this is their laws. The clown has a right to lead the nation despite all these dirty laundry hanging every day. We can all see it. It's ridiculous. And
they were having a debate, sister, whether he should be prosecuted or not. And then they were saying, but there could be consequences to
we know if brother
if
President Obama did just one, forget about the many. of the things. And it's sad that we always come back to if
Right.
someone who's black
Yeah,
did it,
but
but
we
it's
have,
the
because we want
reality.
people to think and make
Yes,
the connection. And
Mm.
never
He-
forget.
he would be in jail.
Mhm.
Mhm.
He would be in jail or somewhere in retirement, not being able to do anything,
Mm.
Yep.
eating peanut butter and jelly for lunch every day.
Yep. Well put, comrades. All right, so I'm going to continue reading. In general, no later than 180 days after the date of the enactment of this act, and annually thereafter for 5 years, the Secretary of State, in consultation with the heads of other relevant federal departments and agencies as appropriate, shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report on the strategy and implementation plan required by subsection A and related efforts to counter the malign influence and activities of the Russian Federation and its proxies in Africa. 2 elements. The report required by paragraph 1 shall include the following. A, an assessment of the scope and nature of the Russian Federation's malign influence and activities and related diplomatic, economic, and security priorities and strategic objectives of such engagement in Africa,
Yep.
including, yes,
Go on. No,
Like-
no,
okay.
no. I am
including influence and activities that involve Russian proxies, such as Russian oligarchs, Russian-funded private military contractors, and other individuals and entities directly or indirectly employed by or financially or politically associated with Russia and its officials who are involved in or aid activities to, among other things, 1, manipulate African governments and their policies. Manipulate African governments and their policies. Before African countries can get a loan from the World Bank and IMF, they have to sign on conditionalities.
Yes.
How more
yes.
can anyone in the world manipulate African government policies?
I mean,
Think
the
about that.
irony that they're writing a bill to manipulate African countries and their policies while putting that in it is just, it's ridiculous. It's hilarious.
No, we have to tell it like it is. And I'm glad that we picked this topic for today's show. Now that we're going to the details, so I hope you're making notes. So let me continue.
Yes.
As well as the public opinions and voting preferences. Whoa! Let me read this entire section again.
Yep.
1, manipulate African governments and their policies, as well as the public opinions and voting preferences of African populations and diaspora groups.
Yes.
This is where you come in too, Sister Nduku,
Yes.
and you come in too, Adesoji. So you're actually directly impacted by this, so now, your malign activities are going to be put
I should
into
send a
check.
thank you note to the US government
No.
for representing me.
Now your malign activities are going to put into check. I'd been wondering how to control you two guys. Now I see it. It's right here.
Oh well, you've got the template there.
You have Representative Greg Meeks looking out for you.
You've got the template there.
Yeah.
I mean, when he says malign, go on. When he says manipulate African governments and their policies, what policies? As if the policies are not already manipulated.
Well, you show me, and that's the reason why in his lifetime, not in his lifetime, but when he was president of Tanzania, Tanzania never signed a deal with the IMF.
Yeah.
You read it?
Yes.
It was only after he retired as president. Thomas Sankara never signed a deal with the IMF.
Or the World Bank.
It was only after he got killed. Now you see the correlation too, right?
Yes.
That Burkina signed a bill. But let me just finish, maybe one more section. Diaspora groups, including those in the United States.
That's you. That's you.
Sanduko.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Representative Gregory Mix. I appreciate.
And 2, invest in, engage, or otherwise control strategic sectors in Africa, such as mining and other forms of natural resource extraction and exploitation. So in other words, they're saying these resources are for us, not for Russia, not for China, not for anybody else.
Exactly.
But now they're writing it into a bill to shore up
Monopolizing.
and strengthen imperialism, U.S. imperialism in Africa. That's this part I'm reading right now. That's what he's talking about.
And
Let me just finish and then let's break it down.
Yeah.
Exploitation, military basing, and other security cooperation agreements when you already have 80 military bases in Africa, right? And information and communications technology. All right, so why don't we break this? Why don't we break this down? What do we have so far?
This should have been a comedic coverage of this. We should have had cartoons showing up.
No,
next time
today.
I think we are putting in enough,
I will just
breakdown as well.
I will just ask you to add section F.
Wait, but we're going to go segment by segment.
Okay.
What we had so far. We're going to finish this entire bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot there to swallow. My mouth is full and I'm having trouble
enough time.
chewing.
We're going to finish the entire bill.
Okay, so I will start with the 5-year report. Okay. So you're essentially saying here is a group of countries with democratic processes in place. And they will assume that they vote in their presidents or prime ministers and what have you. But then what you're now saying is, because you're afraid of quote unquote Russians' malign activities, you are going to try to interfere with those elections. The same elections that when you had fears that the Russians were engaged in your elections, you set up an inquiry who went through what they need to go through to reassert your democratic independence. But you can't afford the same democratic independence to African countries and their populations. Can you imagine that mindset? Like, what didn't happen to me or what I thought happened to me, I am actually going to visit it on somebody else.
Even though,
is it called hypocrisy?
Even though I was responsible for the brutal execution of Patrice Lumumba, even though my own State Department wrote a memo to the World Bank saying, withhold disbursing the loans that already been approved for Ghana. And in the memo said that if you withhold it, the economy is going to go downhill. The people of Ghana are going to get disaffected toward Nkrumah, and the army will then seize power. And that's precisely what happened the next year. Okay, but go ahead.
As you say that, brother Adesoji, I remember you spoke in one of our recent shows about the World War II agreement between the US and Europe, where, and you can correct me if I have the world wars confused, but I think it is too, where Europe is in debt after the war and they come to the US and the US says, hey, listen, we're going to cover this as long as you give us Africa, you're good.
The Marshall Plan.
So do you think, because I'm throwing Russia in as Europe, do you think this is the US saying, hey, we had an agreement back then, what do you think you're doing in Africa? Step out.
No, Russia was not part of that agreement because Russia
for Western Europe.
Exactly. And Russia has been largely anti-colonialist. So Russia has history. You're talking the Battle of Adwa. You're talking Second World War against Benito Mussolini. Once the African countries wanted to start asserting their own independence, they looked to Russia for weapons
and training.
And so, exactly. So if you look in the flag of most liberation struggled countries, you will see the AK-47. And that's the reason.
Yeah.
Because that was the weapon that they used to assert their independence.
Right.
Not because, what's it called? Not so much because the Russians were anti the West, but it was almost like, if you people want to be free and you want us to help you, there you go.
So are you saying that the AK-47 belongs to Russia? What does AK stand for?
That's the name, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is Anatoly Kalashnikov.
Kalashnikov.
47, and it was the gun was yes, it was designed in 1947.
A Russian individual.
And it's one of the cheapest weapons one of the most recognizable weapons
in liberation struggles.
Right.
Because when the guy said, Anatoly, when he was designing the weapon, he said it should be so easy that even a man who has never seen a spoon should be able to dismantle it and arrange it back again. It's the only weapon of its kind that can be done like that.
So let me ask you something, brothers, because as we discuss this, something is coming up in my head, and this is what I like about our conversations. They're organic, and they move from one place to the other organically. So I'm seeing trolls coming for us and saying, "You are pro-Russia. You are supporting Russia. You all this stuff." What are we going to say about that? I know what I'm going to say, but I want to hear what both of you are going to say.
Brother Alimadi, you want to go first?
Okay, we're supporting Russia how? By what do? We critique all imperialism.
No, you're saying Russia was good. They came, they gave us AK-47.
No, we're going. The history is real.
Saying.
That's well documented.
They're a good country. Russia should be able to do business in Africa. Is this what both of you?
No,
is this what we're saying?
We're able to break it down and look at aspects of history as they change as well.
That's it.
During the 60s and 70s, there's no question that Russia, China supported the liberation struggle in African countries, offered scholarships, offered weapons, offered training. You know, China's business relationship, for example, with Africa was very different. Now China is a global, you could say even with respect to the economy, you could say capitalist power. You know, when it comes to global trading. But in the 60s and 70s, when China needed allies, it was still building its economy. China built the Tanzania-Zambia railway and forgave the cost. There's no way a Western country could do something. In fact, the World Bank rejected it. The first place Tanzania and Zambia went to was the World Bank. They rejected it. China said, we'll build it for you. The first major construction costing hundreds of millions of dollars. That was China. So how can we ignore that history? So in work, Adesoji is also saying that in that voting to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine, all that past history was also coming into play. African countries remember that history and what Russia had done at a particular time. And in fact, some of them were saying this, the way, as Adesoji also said, the way the condemnation, the vote was written, it almost precluded the possibilities of a negotiated outcome to this war. And now we are seeing it. The U.S. does not seem interested in negotiating an end to this conflict. And that's demonstrated by the billions of dollars that is being sent to Ukraine, and the weapons, the most sophisticated weapons that are being sent. You see? So now you're putting both sides in a no-win situation. They have to fight it out and keep fighting because, as many people have said, this is actually the U.S. taking control of this war and becoming sort of a proxy war between the U.S., and Russia. Go ahead.
Which is kind of the same thing that the U.S. does when it comes to Ethiopia, right? They force them to sit and have talks and stop fighting. So you would
but
think
not in
that,
this case.
But you would think, right?
I like that analogy.
You would think that them having taken that practice, they would understand why Africa is trying to push them to negotiate. But clearly, there's something else at play here. The U.S. does not see itself as an entity that should be told by Africa what to do.
Or some wars must end, some wars must continue. It just proves that there is a particular agenda behind it. So I'm glad you made that observation.
And then the
floor is yours.
And then you also have to look at the geopolitical angle with regards to forcing Ethiopia to settle that war. One was the fact that if that war had continued, the Tigrayans would have pushed in both ways. i.e., they will push into Eritrea. And if they push into Eritrea, they will create a refugee situation that will spill over into Djibouti.
Yes, we
Guess
don't
who is
mess
in
with Djibouti.
Guess who is in Djibouti? All of
Everyone and
them.
their mother.
All of them are there with their bases. So you don't want to create a security
No, but don't say
solution.
all of them. Some listeners may have just started following
We,
us.
we need
Okay.
specifics.
Clarify.
So what we're saying is, if you look at Djibouti is one of the most military garrisoned country on the face of the earth, literally.
Yes.
Because it has Italian bases, Chinese bases, US military bases, British
It is your
bases.
Walmart for military.
Mhm.
The one-stop shop.
No, when you say no, it's your warehouse. Literally,
Yep.
they're all
Which
there.
is what Walmart
Walmart.
is.
Mhm.
That's Walmart.
So, exactly.
Not everybody knows Walmart. Remember,
Yeah,
he's in
exactly.
the
So
UK.
it's literally a warehouse of military bases.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so going back to the issue of Russia. Now, if you're to look on that basis and say, but why is it particular that in that language it mentioned Russian proxies and mentioned Russian-backed oligarchs?
Yes, break it down.
I was then
getting into capitalism now. Go
then
ahead,
I was
brother.
then. Well,
Mhm.
Americans don't fight humanitarian wars.
It's all capitalism.
Not in the history of United States. They've never fought in the humanitarian war or sided. Even at the height of the Rwanda genocide, they were nowhere to be found.
It's all about the dollar bill. Go ahead,
So,
brother.
if there is no money to be made, why should we be there?
Mm.
So, which then led me back to the sponsors of the bill, their background, where they're from. Texas. What's Texas known for? Oil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. California. What's California known for? What's it famous for? Mineral resources, cobalt, lithium. Okay. And New Jersey, New York.
Good old New Jersey and New York.
New Jersey, New York. Proximity to Wall Street.
The money.
And all of them trade their stocks on Wall Street. So there must be money involved. Okay. Let's follow the pointing. So there is this particular group called the Wagner Group. What is the Wagner Group? The Wagner Group is a group of Russian mercenaries, or to use Western parlance, military contractors.
Private military contractors.
Private military contractors. The likes of what was Blackwater. So now, why the focus on Wagner? Wagner will first of all come into the US consciousness in 2018. What was happening in 2018? That was in Syria, when Damascus was under a siege. The US Special Forces basically had Damascus surrounded, and Russia stepped in, but not in the way you think Russia stepped in.
It wasn't Russia's official military, was it?
Well, since when did Blackwater become US military official army? The same way. So Wagner stepped in. When Wagner stepped in, who owns Wagner? A guy by the name Yevgeny. His name escapes me now.
A Russian oligarch.
Yeah, a Russian, a Kremlin oligarch. So you then begin to see the flow. So they literally push the Americans back. So he was like
Yevgeny Prigozhin.
Prigozhin. That's his name.
Yeah, and for listeners who want to do more research, let me just quickly spell and then you can continue.
Yes.
Prigozhin. Prigozhin. And Yevgeny is Yevgeny. Please continue, Brian.
Yes. So Yevgeny then turns his having secured Syria and secure the bag, as it, to use American parlance, in Syria, then looks around like, okay, where else can I take my business dealings? He then looks and finds a map. Sudan. Who is in Sudan? Omar el-Bashir. Omar el-Bashir is constantly, being harassed by the West for his anti-human rights violations and what have you. And then el-Bashir does a deal with the Wagner Group. For that Wagner Group, what does Wagner Group get in return? They get access to the oil wells that are now part of South Sudan.
Right.
So, but
that goes back to the point on the resources.
Exactly.
Right?
So we're still following the money trail. Follow the bag. Fast forward, in December of that same 2018, Wagner Group then comes to the Central African Republic.
Yes.
Comes into Central African Republic.
Very rich in resources too. Continue.
There you go. Cornered by all sides, by rebel groups, some backed by our friend in Uganda.
The U.S. proxy.
Why are you trying to trigger our brother?
No, it's all true though.
So one backed by our brother in Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni. Another by Paul Kagame,
the forever president.
Yes, and the unstable situation in Congo. So literally, he was cornered. So he brings in the Wagner Group. They push back all these people, and what do the Wagner Group get in return? They get access to resources.
Right.
So you can see the resources idea that keeps popping up in that bill.
Right.
That is where it comes from.
No, he's right, 100%. In fact, before you continue, brother, I wrote, as I was preparing also, I wrote that this bill should be called Protecting the U.S. and NATO Countries' Imperial Zones in Africa from Russian Imperialism Act. That's what it should be called. And that's exactly what you're outlining.
If they're going to be transparent, which is a charge they put in here, this is what, just let us know who you are.
This is where then, of late, you then have the Wagner Group turn up in Mali. Who do they kick out there? The French.
They weren't invited to the U.S. African Leaders Unit. What's it called again?
So who did they kick out in Mali? They kicked out the French. What did the French lose out on? The access to the gold mines and what have you. Same thing in Burkina Faso. The access to gold mines, they were kicked out. But then what was the cover? Here is where I'll tie everything together. So what was the cover for for the US, France, and the UK to say we would not like the idea of the Wagner Group in the Sahel, which is the region where Mali,
North Africa.
Mali, Chad, Niger Republic are sitting. It was the fact that there was weapons. There was a quote unquote the Islamic State operating in the Sahel. It is curious that they will mention the Islamic State operating in the Sahel.
Terrorism has come in now.
Yes. Why is the issue of terrorism being mentioned? Here is the thing. You're focused on the Sahel, but you're not looking up north, which is where you should actually be looking. And I will end with this, like a kid wrapping his Christmas presents. Well, I don't believe in Christmas.
Unwrapping it?
Unwrapping his Christmas.
So long as Santa is a brother, I can forgive you. but go ahead.
Well, okay. So,
what happened? Even make him
we opened of course we opened the show with the idea, with the notion that a leader, an African leader, the US destroyed an African country in the north of Africa. Yes. That country by the name of Libya,
which is interfering with voting and the public's
the leader, Muammar Gaddafi was killed. He was a Pan-Africanist. but he had his own
tortured and killed, not
he
just
had
killed.
he had his own shenanigans.
His own idiosyncrasy, as the West call it.
Like every human being does.
He
We'll
has his
start
own.
with the former president of the US, Donald J. Trump.
He has his own peculiarities, and like
Right.
the great thinker John Clark will say that sometimes there are just no good guys.
No good guys.
So in this case, what did Gaddafi do? Gaddafi was killed. That's a different story. But then the aftermath of what happened after Gaddafi was killed was
Exactly.
the fact that the US and its cohorts, the UK and France, were all trying to get their hands on the Libyan oil fields. But unfortunately, they came short. Why? Because before they got there, who was there waiting for them?
Your friends from the Wagner.
Must be.
The Wagner group. So they had no access to the oil, haven't toppled the leader. So all they had was Tripoli.
And let me add something and then continue, brother. For listeners who think, this is just, coming out of nowhere. Before Gaddafi was overthrown, and you can, look this up. In fact, Comrade, if you have my book in front of you somewhere, I don't have it. I don't have a copy of my own book.
Manufactured Hate.
Right. In the introduction, I discuss it when I'm discussing the section on the destruction of Libya. And I think I have a date of that specific issue, but there was an article in Newsweek magazine before Gaddafi was overthrown. The Treasury Department waived a law, right? And by waiving it, it allowed U.S. oil companies to start signing oil deals with people who had not yet even formed a government in Libya.
Don't get me started on justice and U.S. law.
Okay.
Yep.
The article is there in Newsweek. Treasury waived that restriction, allowing oil companies to start signing contracts with, at that point, a non-existing government.
So are you saying, brother Alimadi, I'm going to just detour just a bit. Are you saying that U.S. law is flexible when it comes to their interests?
Well, that was the best example. And the answer is yes, 100%. In other words, you're saying the laws are meaningless. Because if you can just manipulate, suspend, provided it fulfills your interest, and this was the best example. And it has slipped my mind, so I'm glad that, the brother is laying it out, because then, it reminds me of some aspects of that. And brother, before I turn it back to you again, I want to go back to the fact, because the sister mentioned the Marshall Plan. And here also I want to show you the hypocrisy. The colonial powers went and hijacked the continent, right? That's what they did. Captured the entire population, cheap labor, forced them to grow.
Not just cheap, but go on, brother.
Cheap exploitative labor, forced them to grow cash crops, leading to famine, because you can't eat, cash crops like cotton, tobacco and all that, right? Extracted resources, took on credit, debt, and then said, okay, now it's independent, so the debt, you have to start paying it. In other words, they did the opposite of compensation or reparations, and they left the continent. Now, you have this world war that we are focusing on, World War II. What did they do again? Their economies had collapsed, so even food was being taken from Ghana, Nigeria, and other parts of Africa to feed Europeans. They took hundreds of thousands of Africans to fight in their world war, right? Yes. We don't even know how many died and or got wounded, right?
And
no compensation for that. But at the end of this war, the U.S. gives you the Marshall Plan. $12.32 billion in 1948, which is the equivalent today of $164 billion. So we have to connect all these things and show and instead of compensating Africa, now you're introducing something to sanction Africa. Think about the hypocrisy.
You continue the harm.
Yeah. So we want people to see the full extent.
The
of this
malign
kind of
activities. You continue malign activities.
Exactly. You are actually practicing your own malign activities with this so-called bill to stop malign activities by Russia in
The
Africa.
irony, yes.
Yeah.
Brother Adesoji, as you
the way you break
continue,
it, the way you're breaking it down, right? You're really firing us up, so we can't help.
I keep trying to be patient. Brother Alimadi is the one who's not being patient here. I'm disciplined, sitting here, listening and waiting. But Brother Alimadi.
So, sister, unload before we turn it back to him.
No, and I don't know if I should just turn it back to Brother Adesoji and then let him finish and I'll bring it up. But I want, as far as the private military contractors in Africa, I want them to say something. But Brother Adesoji, finish.
Okay, so yeah, so
and just before you finish, just wanted to remind our listeners and our community, our audience, that in order for myself, Adesoji, Brother Milton, to have more time to do this research, we ask you to support us by either joining our Patreon community on patreon.com/Kumbukeni or subscribe to our YouTube channel so that, as you all know, YouTube has, what do we call them, Brother Adesoji?
Algorithms.
The algorithms, yes. And once a channel hits 1,000 subscribers, it starts generating income. So the more income myself, Adesoji, and Brother Alimadi generate with this channel, the more we can dedicate time to doing the research and bringing this information to you all and countering the false narrative that has been perpetrated against Africa. Go ahead, Brother Adesoji.
Thank you, sister.
Okay. Yeah, so in 2019, so the Wagner Group will then link up with a Libyan warlord by the name of Khalifa, what's his name again? Khalifa Hifter.
Yes. Sorry, brother. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Khalifa Hifter, you know where his residence was before he showed up?
The United States?
Not only the United States, but in Langley, Virginia.
Yeah.
And you know what is in Langley, Virginia? Right?
Hey.
The headquarters of that famous
of the company.
The company. I like it, right?
The company. Yes. Just say the company. Just say the company. So he's a company man.
Yeah, the company man. Good.
Yeah,
an executive.
So they help him control the oil fields. Now, that is where it gets curious. The fact that he was a Langley man, and I didn't even know that. So, which means he's renegade on the deal.
You just got another dot to connect.
So he's renegade on the
acting like
deal.
an American.
Okay. So he's renegade on the wheel. So this Wagner Group helps him to secure the oil fields, and they are now exploiting the oil fields.
Yes.
Now, this is where I would yield to you guys. I will say this. The UN then sponsors a conference asking the Wagner Group to disengage from Libya. Could anybody tell me where that conference was held?
In the United States? In New York?
No. But
France?
The conference was held. You can't make this stuff. It was held in Berlin, and it was titled the Berlin Conference.
Oh no. Okay. I rest my case, even though it's your
History
case.
repeats itself.
Even though it's your case, I rest my case.
Sometimes when it's so painful, you have to laugh. This is what Brother Adesoji is doing.
Right.
It gets so painful, you have to laugh, or you'll be crying all day.
But comrade, again, bring all the listeners on board. Some of our listeners are young and still are learning this
Explain
history.
to them the Berlin connection. Yes,
Exactly.
please.
Okay,
Definitely.
so
Good
the
point,
the Berlin Conference was held in, actually, it's called the Berlin Conference of 1885.
Yes.
But the true duration it should have been known as the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, because the meeting itself started in October of 85 in Berlin. It was called by King Otto Bismarck, who brought in Chancellor Otto Bismarck, who brought in the other powers. You're
Mhm.
talking about the French, the British,
His
the
fellow
Portuguese,
crooks.
the Portuguese,
Mhm.
Belgium. No, Belgium. He didn't call him Belgium. He called
Oh yeah,
him one.
Belgium. In fact, was an observer. Didn't
No,
count the
Belgium.
king.
Belgium
It
came
sounds,
in as one person. That
it
Yes,
was
sounds
King
this
Leopold.
Leopold. No,
this
he's right. He's right.
this
He
sounds like
came
the
in.
Godfather calling all
He came,
The capos,
all the what are they called, the mafia
the
leaders,
family leaders. No.
right?
Don't malign them. They're called family
This
leaders.
sounds like
Yeah.
the Godfather calling the family leaders for a meeting.
So
Go
it
ahead.
was at that meeting that the idea of breaking up Africa, popularly known as the Scramble for Africa,
Exactly.
was etched out, where basically all they did was just draw lines across stands. If you look at the map of Africa, 30% of the sides of African countries are straight lines. There is no straight line in anyone's home.
No.
How can you draw straight lines splitting people? It is so ironic.
You only do it when it's real estate.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It is even ironic that the Maasai, you will find the Maasai people in both sides of a river. In East Africa, you will find some of them in Zimbabwe. I say Zimbabwe.
Kenya.
In Kenya and Tanzania.
Yes.
But
And
they
in
want
Uganda,
The
there's
Luo.
a
The
particular
Luo.
people
Yeah.
who in Uganda, they're brothers. One became a minister of technology, and his brother in Kenya was the vice president.
Yeah.
There you go. So one body of people, but under two different imperial flags.
So Brother Adesoji, quickly, I
Wrap it
paint the
up.
picture. Let me paint the picture quickly.
Why did you bring up Berlin? Because of this meeting concerning Libya now being held, ironically,
in Berlin.
Yes.
In Berlin.
Asking another power to leave Africa. The same
Scramble.
Africa you came into.
Right.
Scramble.
Listeners, you cannot have this even written up in Hollywood. That's what Brother Adesoji essentially is telling you. You can't.
They're not going to approve it for production.
Come on. You can't. You
Yeah.
can only have it produced in the real world, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in stitches when I'm like, no, did I just read that?
And I don't believe you saved this for yourself, but it's good that all of us are getting this exclusive on Kumbukeni.
Yes.
even his co-host, Brother, can you save what you have so I can read a little more from the...
But before you do, let me just respond quickly. 2 minutes.
Please.
Before you do. Brother Adesoji, you're done?
Yes.
Right.
For now.
So for me, the thing that came as I was doing my research, I said, okay, because again, that's my mind. I ask myself questions. When I see something, I'm like, could this be? What if? And I said to myself, does the US have private military contractors in Africa? And as I was doing that research, I came across CACI. Their website is caci.com and Academy. And CACI is CACI. And I'm going to quickly read this. According to their website, CACI's website, they are a $6.2 billion company whose mission and enterprise technology and expertise play a vital role in the US's national security, safeguarding US troops and enabling the US government to deliver cost-effective and high-quality support for all Americans. Remember, they're doing it globally, but it's for America. It was founded in 1962 by Herb Kerr, that's Herb, first name, last name Karr, and Harry, as in Prince Harry, but not Prince Harry, Markowitz, that's Markowitz. The second company, which is a private contractor, military private contractor, is Academy, Academi. It's a company within the Constellis family of companies. This is how they hide these things. It goes in under bureaucracy. You can't even find it unless you go digging. Constellis is Constellis. And according to their website, they exist to serve their customers, helping them navigate diverse environments and guiding them to success no matter where they are in the world. And my question was, who gave this organization authority to navigate diverse environments in the world in Africa? So these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. If the US is pointing at Russia and saying, you cannot have private contractors in Africa, why is the US turning around and doing it? And then, does that validate the sanctions? No, it doesn't, is the answer. But go ahead, Brother Alimadi.
Those companies you mentioned are very notorious. They actually are a company called Blackwater, which, the brother will give some of the crimes they were committing in African countries and elsewhere around the world, by the way.
Yes.
And that is why they were so notorious. They were forced to change the names, so this, whether it's Academy, whether it's Z, XE, it's still the same,
same people,
iteration of Blackwater.
Listen,
and that's what it's all
I wish
about.
I could change my name every time I do something bad.
There you go. Okay. So, brother, can you save this response, or you want a response now before I read more?
No. You carry on.
Okay, so make a note of that so that we can break this.
And just to give you the heads up, brothers, we are running out of time. Just look at that clock as we continue. Left? We are at 11 minutes after 1 o'clock. So
we have 19 minutes.
About
9 minutes.
No.
19.
About 19 minutes, yes.
19
okay,
minutes.
Very good. All right, so let me read as much as possible from this. Okay, a detailed account of United States foreign assistance. So now you're admitting that this thing is used as a blackmail, which we have been saying all along, and other initiatives developed and implemented during the preceding 3 fiscal years to address Russia's malign influence. I have to change the tone of my voice every time I say malign influence and activities in Africa, including the objectives and details of planned programs and initiatives set out in the strategy required by subsection A. C, an analysis of policy and programmatic limitations, gaps, and resource requirements to effectively counter Russia's malign influence and activities in Africa. D, an overview of other initiatives and assistance programs funded by other international donors and partner countries. So now they're saying not only US money, but the monies of our friends that go to Russia, we're going to go to them now and say, listen, that go to Africa and saying, we are withholding, you have to withhold too.
Yeah.
This is exactly what happened with the Zimbabwe sanctions. Remember?
There you go.
The US passed its sanctions in 2001 against Zimbabwe, and then the next year, 2002, the EU passed its sanctions against Zimbabwe. So they're lining up now sanctions, not against one African country this time, but potentially against any African country dealing with Russia. Yeah. So let me continue. D, an overview of other initiatives and assistance programs funded by other international donors and partner countries to counter Russia's malign influence and activities in Africa. E, an identification of African governments and government officials, Russian government officials, and other individuals and entities that have facilitated payments and other prohibited activities. Wow. So there's a website that's going to say these are the prohibited activities?
Yes.
No.
Wow. Yeah. That benefit United States sanctioned individuals and entities tied to Russia, including in violation of the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, Executive Order 14024, blah, 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 relating to blocking property with respect to specified harmful foreign activities of the government of the Russian Federation, and Executive Order 13848 relating to imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. And a detail, okay, so they're saying that same law is now going to be applied with respect to Russia's activities in Africa. All right, so I think I'm coming toward the end of this bill. So let me just finish it then. Yeah, I'll just read it very quickly now.
Yes, please.
And if you hear something interesting, just make a note of it.
Yeah.
F, an identification of foreign companies and persons that have provided, transportation, logistical, administrative border crossing of money transfer
God
services.
help you if you didn't know you were doing it.
Exactly, good point. To Russian mercenaries or armed forces operating on behalf of the Russian government in Libya, as the brother exposed a few minutes ago.
There you go.
And an analysis of whether such entities meet the criteria for imposition of sanctions under Section 1A of Executive Order 13726, 81 Federal, blah, 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 relating to blocking property and suspending entry into the United States of persons contributing to the situation in Libya. 3, form. The report required by the paragraph 1 shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include classified annex.
Yeah.
And then finally, Section 4, appropriate congressional committees defined. In this act, the term, quote, appropriate congressional committees, end quote, means 1, the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives, and 2, the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate. This bill was passed the House of Representatives April 27, 2022.
So before we even get into the nitty-gritty of the bill, that last part of the bill, something that I wanted us to capture for the audience before we wrap up is why are we bothered with sanctions? What exactly do sanctions do for a nation? Why does it bother us? What is it that we're worried about?
Let me give Zimbabwe very quickly and then come back to you. Zimbabwe used to be the African country that was on the verge of industrialization. And that is what the West does not want to happen. In 1960, Ghana's per capita income was about $200. China was 90. So Ghana was more than double that of China. Imagine. That's not a long time ago, 1960. Today, because China has industrialized, China is now a global power. Africa has not been allowed to industrialize. That is why we still sell raw cocoa, raw peanuts or groundnuts, you call it. In other words, we sell
coffee,
cheap,
beans,
coffee, tea, whatever, very cheap.
Leaves.
And then we import manufactured items, and that's why we remain weak. Zimbabwe was on that on the road. So the sanctions, in a way, even though it's to punish the land redistribution, restoring the land to the African descendants from whose parents it was stolen in Zimbabwe, it is also to deindustrialize Africa. That's what sanction does. And once you can't industrialize, you remain impoverished. So this is another aspect of that sanction. So I'm glad you raised the question that way. The sanction has removed $21 billion from Zimbabwe's economy. The sanction, as you recall, the hyperinflation of thousands of percent, people needed to go with a whole truck of cash
banknotes
to buy a loaf of bread.
I remember that. We were laughing about it, but it's nothing funny about it.
They started using the US dollar as their currency. That's
talk
some
about
of the
conflict
impact.
of interest.
That's some of the impact of sanctions. Okay,
and I was thinking about that. What is included in sanctions are trade embargoes, which means that the US, by this sanction, is saying that no nation can do trade with that nation. And therefore, they do not make revenue, which ends up affecting their citizens. So that is where you see prices for food going up and prices for gas going up, because you don't have the resources that you need, because you cannot trade with other countries, and therefore here you are. But yes, go ahead, Brother Adesoji. This is ridiculous.
Yes. I'm even
There's so many aspects, I know.
I'm stumped.
Touch on what you think are the most essential.
With 11 minutes left to go, find the words.
The most essential.
Yes. Okay. So it will be remiss of us if we talk about how we feel about it and not allow the leaders to also voice their opposition to it. And they did. We have to be honest, they did. At the South African Development Community meeting, SADC, the leaders unanimously pushed back against the idea of sanctions on Africa. And they also said, yes, they were going to table it. I mean, they passed a motion at the meeting to table another motion at the forthcoming AU meeting, so that idea will be discussed. But here's the curious thing. Only one person pushed back against that motion. Guess who?
Uganda?
Yeah, I know the guy. I know the guy is.
Museveni?
I refer to him as a CIA asset, but don't tell
The
me he went that far.
the forever president?
Don't tell me he went that far.
Yes, he did. Everyone got up and said,
All right, so now, sisters and brothers, because sometimes I think when I tell
have
people
no
how-
agenda against
when,
you, brother.
No, when I
None.
tell people how nasty this guy really is, sometimes people may have doubt. I
They
think
think
now
you-
there
they
can be
think
no
you're
doubt
yeah.
after what you just gave us as an
he
exclusive.
was
Only African
he was the
president of
literally
all the 54 African
no, not
countries.
50, not 54. Yeah, the South
Southern
African
African,
development.
yeah.
Southern
He is a
Africa,
Southern,
okay.
so it's a regional body.
Okay.
But
think it's
of that
about
regional
18.
body,
Yes,
of
yes,
that
yes,
regional
yes.
body, of that regional body, in sitting, he was the only one who pushed back.
Okay. But listen, this is the only African, and I hesitate to call him even president, I call him dictator. The only African ruler who, after Donald Trump said, call Africa an S-hole
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
collection of countries. He and people who think this is incredible, you can research it, Google it, and you'll see it. He said, I love Donald Trump
Yeah,
for
that's what he
saying
said.
that.
Yeah.
Google it and you'll see it on CNN, BBC, it was all over the place.
Good question for Museveni is, what are
You
you
know?
doing to not make your country a shithole?
You know? But back to you, brother. We're running out of time.
So yeah, for me, one of the most powerful statements during that meeting was made by the Malawian president, Lazarus Chigwere. And he said, Africa is not for sale. Africa is open for business and not for looting. We must defend what is ours and make sure that no one takes from us what is ours.
I want to hear that more of that kind of talk.
Could you say that one more time? Read that one more time,
Yep.
brother. So deep, like take your time with that.
He said, okay, this was the statement made at that meeting by the Malawian president, Lazarus Chakawera. Africa is not for sale. Africa is open for business, not for sale or looting. We must defend what is ours and make sure that no one takes from us what is ours.
Exactly.
So it's, if you have leaders like this, and
no, but
then
it's good because I like what we're doing because we're exposing the fact that there's some rulers who should not be ruling African countries
at all.
And that, once again, this is where people start seeing value of Kumbukeni today. And I'll let you come back and close again, but I wanted people not to miss the point. We've had exclusive revelations in today's program. The new Berlin conference, you know, you share that exclusive with the world, but with your co-host as well. The SADC vote, you share that exclusive. And, you know, we know that not every African has Africa.
I'm looking forward to those African drums. Right? Go ahead.
You share that with our global audience and with your co-host today. Listeners, there's value in Kumbukeni. Brother, go ahead and close.
And the host, Cyril Ramaphosa, then said this. He said, the U.S. State Department and the White House should support negotiations between Kiev and Moscow, which has been routinely undermined by Biden and his cabinet ministers.
And I bet you this was not reported in the New York Times or the Washington Post or CNN or even BBC.
No.
You see?
No.
And Ramaphosa, by the way, for some listeners, this is the president of South Africa.
South Africa, yes.
Who is currently under investigation, which might tie into this?
Cyril Ramaphosa, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So this is what happens when African presidents speak up.
Who was it that said it? What's his name? If Sekiture, he says, when you hear them scream my name, shout my name, you should know that I have sold you out.
When you hear an African president being villainized, you should ask yourself, what did they do right that is upsetting these imperialists?
I mean, the way he said it, he said, if you hear them praise me, be rest assured I have sold you out.
Yeah. It means it's time to get rid of me.
So, brother Adesoji, are you saying to our African leaders, our African brothers and sisters, because we do have both male and female leaders in Africa, are you saying to them that it is better to be criticized by imperialists than to be, what's the word, to be complimented, as far as being a good leader for your nation?
I am saying it is 2023. It is the 21st century. You have no reason to kowtow to any foreign power for anything. If they don't want you, you're already president of your country. You will get a retirement pension. You will have a house. You will have access to food. That is all man needs. You don't need to drive a Tesla on the streets of Africa. There is no point to it.
The other thing too, as far as empowering our people, is Africa can do trade within Africa. If indeed Europe and the US and China economies are being held by Africa, why doesn't Africa hold its own economy itself?
That is the subject of a whole show.
Sure,
Right.
exactly. I will preface,
and it must be because
yes.
She mentioned a good point. Within amongst themselves, Europe trade is over 80% of their trade, right? Is accounted by trade with other Europeans. Africa trade amongst other Africans, less than 17% of their total trade. So it's outrageous, and that we should actually plan a program.
Would we call that intra-African trade?
That's what we need. And but sister, that's not by accident. Before engagement with Europe, the most sophisticated trade routes are within Africa. So at some point, the intra-Africa trade was actually almost 100%.
Yeah.
So they came and they disrupted the organic pattern and said, stop trading amongst yourselves. I want you now to grow cocoa for me and trade with me.
My peoples are known, the Akamba people are known to be long distance traders. They would walk all the way to Mombasa to trade.
We're going to do a whole show about that. But brother, before you give the final word, I like the point that you brought up Sekou Touré. And for our new listeners who may not be familiar, he was the first leader of Guinea, and he was the only leader of the French dependencies and colonies who, when given the option for all the people and leaders there to vote, yes, to remain as colonies, or no, to separate and become independent, the only one who voted no, and it was punished. They unscrewed even the light bulbs. They tore the electric cables from the stores.
They poured everything. They poured concrete down, water pipes,
took it back to France to punish him. So I'm glad we're evoking these names.
Pettiness.
And when we evoke them, we want to, bring a little bit of their character too.
Yes.
Which also took me to, as you're speaking, I'm thinking Thomas Sankara, of course.
Oh.
More people know about Thomas Sankara, but I don't know if most know that he was invited to the White House.
Yes.
And at that time, I think Ronald Reagan was the president.
Ronald Reagan was president, yes.
On condition that the U.S. embassy officials would read his speech that he was going to make at the United Nations.
Imagine that.
Before.
Can you imagine if an African president said that? Oh, right. Biden is coming to Kenya.
Let's read your speech first.
Can we read your speech first before you present it?
And he said, no. Yeah. He refused. So the invitation was withdrawn.
But where did he go to give the speech?
This is a courageous African leader.
Brother Alimadi, could you add, where did Sankara go to give his speech?
He went to Harlem.
Yes.
And he said, my White House is in Black Harlem.
And what was his opening statement at the UN?
I wait for you to drop that.
I bring you greetings from 7 million men, women, and children who have refused to die.
That's a great
comrade.
ending.
I don't think you can add anything better than that.
That's a great closing.
I think we should close the program.
Yes.
On that note, any final words from you, comrade? Because sister needs to close with another pitch.
I do need to call people to action. Yes.
Before she does, you go ahead.
Yes. For our listeners in the United States, call, text, ring your senator to say this is unacceptable. They should revisit the bill and repeal it before it becomes law.
Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. I can't add anything to that. I think listeners, the only thing I can say that I'm sure you learned 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 new things in today's episode. That's why we encourage you to come back every week to really share with us and listen to us. And also, of course, to communicate by posting your chats and comments.
Yes.
Now, all to you, sister. So you can.
And now, yes, our biggest call for support right now is for subscription on our YouTube channel. We are going for that 1,000 subscribers. We have hit 197 as of yesterday. We're hoping to get to 1,000 soon. So we ask you all to support us so that we can do this work. We can give more time to the research and discovery of what is going on in Africa by subscribing to Kumbukeni's YouTube channel at youtube.com/@Kumbukeni1. Again, that's youtube.com/@Kumbukeni1. All right. Kwaherini. Siku njema.
A luta continua, as Samora Machel used to say in Mozambique.